Hello and welcome back to the Section 101 podcast. I am Ben Lyle Schwartz, filling in for Ronnie Decker as me and our website developer Tom Stilp cover the MLB Draft and the MLB Midway. How you doing, Tom?
Pretty good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so before we get started, just a couple things. Check out our website, section101.org. We got some good things going on there. Be sure to follow us on Instagram for some updates and announcements. We're on YouTube with some long-form content, so be sure to subscribe there. And we're on Spotify with these podcasts. Be sure to follow us. This Sunday, I am doing a collab with YouTuber Jello G Pastel as we give out our WWE Mid-Year Awards, so be sure to look out for that. And without further ado, let's get into this, the MLB Draft. Number 1 to the Cleveland Guardians, Travis Bazzana. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I thought it was a great pick. You know, a stat that especially stuck out to me was last season he had 40 more walks than he had strikeouts, which is such like an impressive thing to do in baseball. You know, he's got some great speed and he's got some great strength. He has a bad arm, which could limit him to second base instead of playing his shortstop. And he's also the first Australian-born player selected in the first round in draft history, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and we saw the NBA draft, I think, had 2 Italians, I think it was
French.
French, yeah, because there were 3 French players in the top, so now we have an Australian and we have a Italian going in the top sort of echelons, which is proving that these sports are going international, which is an awesome thing for sports in general.
Especially for baseball, though, that it's been such a kind of American sport. And just kind of been in America and Japan recently, but now that it's going out to Australia, and yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah, and we've always seen, like, the islands, they always give us good players, and it's the American pastime, but it really is the most multicultural sport on planet Earth, other than soccer. But in one league, the MLB, you're going to find a lot of different cultures and a lot of different styles of playing, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons to love baseball.
Yeah, and another thing I saw was the Chicago White Sox got Hagen Smith, a lefty prospect, the best one in the draft, which I think is huge for the White Sox, who we're going to touch on them later, are just they're a mess this year. And it starts with their pitching. They need to rebuild their pitching staff, and I think it's a good thing for them to get more pitching and to get a guy in Hagen Smith who is a lefty. There are not many like dominant left-handed pitchers in the league. I think it's a great pick for them, and obviously one pick is not going to change their entire team, but it's a good start.
You know, one thing that the White Sox seem to have focused on is some low arm slot lefties. So, example, we got Chris Sale and Greg Crochet, they're lefties, and they all kind of have a submarine arm slot. And so, I mean, I guess if you want to focus on what you develop well, that works, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I gave this pick a B because he walked 10% of batters he faced this season, which, you know, it's not a horrible spot, but especially this high in the draft, you really need to be picking elite players.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to bring up a point that, unlike the NFL and NBA, these guys could take 3, 4, 5, some of them their entire career to even get to AAA or the MLB. That's what's so unique about baseball, is there's so many levels, so many steps before you get up to the MLB, versus where you're seeing these guys get drafted in the NFL and they're thrown into the deep end the next year. And that's why what baseball's so unique about is it gives the players time to develop. And that's what's so good about the minor leagues and getting drafted into a team like the White Sox, who don't have the money to spend on these big players, so they have to force this to their farm system, and I think it's a good thing to create a good farm system to develop these players.
Yeah, that's really important, Ben. A thing with Hagen Smith was something that he struck out 17 batters across 6 innings in this prior season, which is wildly impressive. We were talking about his walks, so things like walks can be fixed, especially, as you were saying, as he develops through the White Sox farm system.
Yeah, so another thing I noticed, we got Zach Jack Caglione out of Florida. He was ranked third in the draft. A couple teams passed up on him. He ended up going to the Kansas City Royals, who continue their streak of great young players. I really like this guy. He's a two-way player. I don't think he's going to stay a two-way player. If you just look at his stats, he does appear to be a better batter than he is a pitcher. But that's something that you're going to have to find an identity to go forward. And the Royals are not a team like, oh, we have real good pitching, so we're not going to need you in that department. But he's got, in my opinion, he has to find an identity, what he wants to become. And that's a big part of going through the minor leagues and seeing what is working for you. But from the stuff I saw in Florida, he's a very, very good player.
Yeah, and so Shohei Ohtani especially has come up as a great two-way player recently. And he's really been the only one in the MLB history to be able to do it well. Babe Ruth was a two-way player, but then he transitioned to just really be batting. And that was 100 years ago. So I think that just because Shohei Ohtani can do it doesn't mean that you can. And Shohei Ohtani has been one of the best pitcher batters in history. So he can pitch and he can play first base. I think he will for sure be playing first base for the majority of his career. He had a 15.7% walk rate last season.
That's a good thing, especially in, three-outcome baseball, as we like to call it. Working walks and not striking out is a very important part. That's what we're seeing a lot in the MLB. Is a lot of guys who walk and strike out and hit homers. But it's not bad to have your first baseman walking. That's not something we see a lot. You think of a lot of these first basemen, they don't draw walks. So having that consistency at the top of your order can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
So the Wake Forest is obviously a very, very good school. They had two players go in the top five. One of them, Chase Burns, an Italian pitcher, getting the number 2 nod to the Cincinnati Reds, a team who has developed Hunter Green into a very solid pitcher. Good pick. Not much to say here, but at the same time, he's got a very bright future, as we've seen them develop Hunter Green and others in this, farm system.
Yeah, and I think Chase Burns is the best pitcher in this draft class this year. He's looking to come into the MLB pretty early. I think CBS said 2025. And what's dangerous is looking at the Reds rotation. They got Chase Burns, if it goes well, Hunter Green, Nicolado, and Rhett Lauder in the rotation, which would be great. So I think it's a great pick. I gave it an A.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to touch on, you can touch on a couple more things, is the Marlins are just making bad decision after bad decision. At the 16th pick the 43rd best player, P.J. Morlando, out of Somerville High School. The Brewers did this picking another high schooler in the next pick with Braylon Payne. The Marlins have to get it together. This whole season has been giving out very much end of the Derek Jeter era vibes, where they're not trying, they're making very out-of-the-box decisions, and it doesn't seem to be paying off at all. We'll get to the standings later, but they just have no success in a division where, with two teams in the top four under 500, they could be making some waves. They have a lot of talent, but this is just, to me, a very confusing pick.
I looked at his stats and how he's been doing, because there's definitely been negative feedback online about this. He has some good offense, not anything that is in the top 15 picks or anything that's even below this, but he has solid offense. The only thing is that he's a bad defensive player. He can't play defense. And he turned 19 a few months ago, which is normally not what you want to see out of a high schooler on draft night. You want that young talent. So I gave it a C-, especially anytime you have to use the word bad in your review, it's not going to be a good pick.
Yeah, the Marlins have just been bad this year. What else do you want to touch on in this?
The Tigers pick of Bryce Rayner. He's a lefty swinging shortstop with power, and I think he honestly could have been selected a lot earlier in this draft. He's a high schooler, but again, he was 19 on draft night. So CBS gave them a B in grade. But I honestly looked at his stats, looked at how he's been hitting. He's a great hitter and average defense, but I think if he can be a good hitter throughout the rest of his career, what more do you want? So I gave that an A+, especially later into these draft picks.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of these, just going through the top 30, there's 7 high school players. It's not like the most normal thing to pick a high school baseball player. We see it a lot in the NBA. You can't do it in the NFL. But at the same time, it really just it sticks out to me the fact that we're doing so much with this young talent. And that to me is very good because baseball can be seen as that boring sport, the one you have to sit around for 3 hours to watch one thing happen. But seeing the amount of young kids that are getting drafted is really, really cool.
Yeah, and these collegiate players who have been playing for longer and have earlier MLB ETAs, they can be risky players to pick because of just track history. So one thing that I'm focusing on is the Athletics' #1 pick. They picked Nick Kurtz out of Wake Forest. And he was a collegiate first baseman, which if you go back, the last collegiate first baseman that was picked in the first round who had a good career was in like 2011, which doesn't mean that this is a bad pick to take. It just means that in prior years, collegiate first basemen have not been good.
And who is that 2011 pick?
I'm forgetting.
It obviously doesn't mean that's someone good. So, point being that these collegiate first basemen, and we said it again with Caglione, who is a first baseman and a pitcher, does it work out? It's a lot of questions to be answered. But, overall, this draft did not give me a lot of stuff to work with. It's going to take a while to see some of these players. And in the MLB, you have 25 players on your roster. So, there are a lot of these second, third round picks mean a lot more in baseball than they do in a lot of other sports because the player pool is so big. You have a chance to be selective at the lower levels. So I think baseball is such a unique sport in the sense that it takes such a long time to get to where the destination is.
Yeah, and some of those later round picks could become one of the better talents in the MLB later. So, it's really focused on the #1 picks and the first round picks. But really, it's really snubbing talent in the later rounds that can get you some great talent in the future.
Yeah, and as that brings us to a close on the MLB draft, we'll now swap to our mid-year review. I've just got a big list of stuff right here of some things I want to go over, just some observations. Obviously, at the end of the season, me and Ronnie will be joined by Charlie Ronsky to make fun of ourselves for some of our earlier season picks, Spencer Strider for Cy Young, and more. The Red Sox are hanging in there. That's something I didn't see happening, and the Orioles are on top as expected. I have the Orioles going to the World Series this year. They're looking like a very solid team. They're young, which means the time is running out, which means they're going to be buyers. You're a young team with a lot of young players. Obviously, Jackson Holliday has not worked out this season, but you have an opportunity here to be a buyer at this deadline before all your players just become these huge, big money stars, and then you can't keep them all. So for the Orioles, these next 2 seasons are very indicative of where this franchise is going to be going. Can they make the right decisions? Can they do the right things at the deadline and build on some pieces that they need to build on?
Yeah, and especially because Baltimore historically has not been a good team. And it's really fun to see teams that aren't these teams that you hear in the World Series year after year, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. You hear them doing well, and it's fun to see these teams that are historically have not been doing well. Not to say that the Yankees have had a bad season with Aaron Judge having one of the most dominant Junes in history. He hit 409 and slugged 864 with a 1.378 OPS and 37 RBIs, which is absolutely crazy. And that is 37 RBIs in just the month of June, which is crazy.
Yeah, and you also have Juan Soto on this team, who I pegged to be my most improved player, and he's done that. He's lowered his K rate. He's become this offensive weapon that I think we all knew he would become after his 2019 World Series showing. And this Yankees team, they have the money. The question is, can they stay healthy? That's a question I also have with the Dodgers. Can you stay healthy? The Red Sox also, they're a team that has potential The Blue Jays are a team that could they turn it around. The AL East is always this conglomerate of teams that are young, and the Yankees. And I think this year it's really showing how good the Orioles farm system is. And maybe the Yankees don't have the money to buy at the deadline the way that the Orioles have that money too.
Yeah, and especially, there's Aaron Judge is looking like the obvious AL MVP candidate. But, you hear Gunnar Henderson, and I think if it wasn't for Judge, he would be the AL MVP. He's hitting .293 with 27 home runs. Just a great overall player, but just Aaron Judge has been dominating the league for this past first half.
Yeah, I mean, people are gonna compare it to like a 62 homer season. For a player to have this much success in such a short period of time is very unprecedented. Especially on the Yankees, a team that is notorious for buying players after their prime and watching them sink to the ground. They have an opportunity with Judge, a guy that came up through their system. They didn't buy him. He wasn't like a Rizzo where you purchase him from the Cubs after he wins a World Series. This is a guy that, you've been able to kind of cultivate, nurture, make your own, and it's really showing that the Yankees maybe have a farm system when we say they don't.
Yeah, and especially I think that is one of the big problems with baseball is there's no salary cap. So you have these big market teams who perform well, and then you have small market teams in smaller cities who just historically do not have the money to perform well.
Yeah, so as we move on to the AL Central, I had the Twins winning the division, and they've done a decent job at that. I've written a couple things. Stephen Kwan leads the MLB in batting average. Yay. Good job. This guy is one of the most underrated players on his team in the league. And in my opinion, the Guardians have the most underrated player in the entire MLB. That's Jose Ramirez, a guy that consistently is just a producer. But you never really hear about him because he's in the AL Central, which is notoriously a god-awful division. He's the most underrated player in baseball, and the Guardians may be the most underrated team in baseball this year.
Yeah, I was about to agree with you.
With
the most underrated
a
team.
record that is comparing to the Orioles and the Yankees. Now, granted, when you're playing the White Sox, 15 times in the year, a little bit easier than playing the Yankees 15 times a year. But they've overperformed. The entire AL Central has overperformed.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And the Guardians coming off a rebrand, again, have not been the team that you think of as like these Yankees, like as you think of these big market teams, especially because the Guardians have a similar market to the Milwaukee Brewers. So it's great to see them perform well.
Yeah, and I've also written the White Sox are pathetic. And that they are, and they will need to turn this organization around very quickly. And yeah, 27 wins in the first half is just a true disappointment. And I had very low expectations for them this year, and they found a way to shatter those, and just, they're awful.
Yeah, I wrote something similar, just one of the worst starts in MLB history. And it's honestly been sad because they came off a stretch where they could have won the World Series. And they had great players like Yasmani Grandal and players like that who, honestly, like, where did they go? They kind of just disappeared, and they're not good anymore. And now they've ended up being just a horrible team.
Yeah, I saw a graphic recently with the Oakland Athletics and that team they had in 2017-18. Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Mark Canha. Those guys are just a few of the names on that team that got knocked out in the wild card back-to-back years. And since then, it's just been a downward spiral for the A's.
Yeah, the Athletics have been one of the biggest dramas in this MLB season with announcing that they're moving to Las Vegas. And I believe they're going to stay in Sacramento in between. Is that right?
Yeah, it's going to be some minor league stadium that they're going to use. And quite frankly, I don't think they'll fill up that minor league stadium.
It's really depressing because the Athletics are such a historic team. It's kind of like taking a team like the Cubs, who, I hate the Cubs, but they're a historic team, and moving them to a different city and taking them away from a great fan base, honestly.
Yeah, and speaking of great fan bases, the Detroit Tigers have one, and so do the Houston Astros. Those are two teams on opposite trajectories. The Tigers started out as one of the best teams in the league. They were looking really promising in an AL Central that is always wide open. And then the Houston Astros, they were so bad I had to make a video on why the Astros suck. And ever since I made that video, they obviously watched it, and they've turned themselves around. Because all of a sudden, they're 50-46. Blink and you'll miss it. This team is what I thought they would be, making it to the ALCS this year. The Rangers, I told Ronnie and Charlie, they didn't listen to me. They're not a team built to win the World Series 2 years in a row when Scherzer and DeGrom are sitting on the bench. It's a team that in an AL West with 4 competitive teams, you are not going to get by without two. You're paying these guys real good money. Scherzer's been injured part of the season. DeGrom, I don't even know about that guy anymore. The Mariners staying in there. I've always liked them. They're a very good team. They've always had the pieces to put it together. They've never really solved that puzzle. They've always been one piece away. It's been that missing piece, and I think they find it this season and make the wild card. But yeah, the Astros, blink and you'll miss it. I checked 2 weeks later, and all of a sudden, they're second place in the AL West.
Yeah, for sure. And the Astros have just done a great job, as you said, getting on that run. You mentioned that the Rangers not being able to make that World Series leap again. And I would agree with you. I think they had what I would consider a lucky postseason in previous years. That, they had the talent, they had the ability to do it, and they did it. But I think there was honestly better talent last year that could have won the World Series and very easily could have beaten them in a series.
Yeah, and the AL just overall is looking very good. I have some more notes on just some individual players we'll get to later, but I still have the Orioles going to the World Series. I think if you make the right purchases at the deadline, which they have the money to do, there's going to be no stopping them. Get a couple of veterans to hang in that locker room, and you are good to go.
Yeah, I would completely agree. We're doing a first half season review. Is it the middle season national anthem for the home run derby?
You're rivaling Fergie in terms of being real bad right there. It was.
I don't even know if I would consider it a rivalry. That was disgusting.
It was horrendous. I always we had a good Super Bowl national anthem this year. I totally forget who did it, but it was real good. Just find better people. It's not that hard. There are so many people in the music industry that you do not need to be wasting time finding big stars. I don't even think she was that big. Who can't sing to save their lives, because that was awful.
And I listened to her on Spotify, and I looked her up on Spotify. She doesn't have a bad voice, and she doesn't have. It wouldn't be music that I would personally listen to.
Auto-tune.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, honestly, it's just there was rumors online that she couldn't hear herself in the stadium, which makes sense because there is a delay in the stadium. But it was just it was awful. Yeah. It was comical, honestly.
It's her and Fergie for just some of the worst national anthems ever, and both on All-Star Weekend. So
yeah, pretty ironic.
Point being, just don't pick weird people to do national anthems on All-Star Weekend. So, for the NL, I don't have much to say in the NL West. It's going exactly how I thought it would go. The Dodgers are playing at a very high level, not the level I expected them to be at, but a level that once they get Glass now back, I think they can achieve. Diamondbacks hanging in there. The Padres, who are my dark horse NL team, are also hanging in there, and the Rockies, after a pretty slow start, have picked it up a decent amount to rival the Marlins. Yeah, not much to say there. How about you?
The Dodgers had a historic purchasing offseason. And, purchasing players has historically not gone well, especially if you purchase a ton of players. And, I actually think that this Dodgers team has done better than I expected, in a sense that just over sports history, not even just baseball, if you spend, they spend billions and billions of dollars on these players. It's just honestly that the team chemistry doesn't really add up when you go into lower market teams with players who don't have big names, who end up, like the Milwaukee Brewers, doing well.
Yeah, and I always say money doesn't buy depth. You can't buy 5 reserves. That's something that doesn't happen. But even looking up and down this roster, all the way down to their 15th best player, Kevin Biggio, that's a recognizable name. That's on your team. Miguel Vargas has been putting in some work. This is a team that nobody wants to face. Absolutely nobody wants to face. I tell you, like, you got Shohei Ohtani having another great season. He's probably going to win MVP again. Tara Glasnow's been good. Yamamoto has been real good after an awful start to the year. Alex Vezdia has been a very good reliever for them. This is a team that they're waiting for some more pieces, but once they get them, they're gonna pass with flying colors.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was kind of downplaying the Dodgers, saying that they weren't doing as well as I expected. But that's saying that the Dodgers have done well this season. And, going back to Shohei Ohtani, you wonder, he's done an amazing job on the batting side. Is he ever going to pitch again with the arm injury?
I don't know. I would like to see him become almost like a long reliever, a guy that if you need him, you have him. But then also you have to say that that's a commitment that you're committing to pitching as well. But the way he's been hitting this season, how could you vote against him for MVP? This is, and especially like on the Dodgers, where you gotta face Smith, Freeman, Betts, Ohtani. 4 guys to start your order. Wow. You would not think that somebody would be sticking out like a sore thumb in that lineup the way Ohtani is. I had Freddie Freeman pegged to win MVP. He's doing really good. Same with Mookie Betts. But Shohei Ohtani is performing at an even higher level than we expected this year.
Oh, yeah, for sure, Ben. And, you go to this MVP race, and Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge obviously seem to be the probable winners. If you go into other markets, especially if you look at Christian Yelich's numbers, he had better first half stats this season than he did his 2018 season, and that is with a month of injuries.
He's missing the power that he had in his MVP season while still hitting at a very high clip. He's missing the power that I think when you got a guy like Ohtani who's hitting 316 with 20 plus homers, Yelich hitting 330 with 10 homers, doesn't really compare. He would really have to wait for Ohtani, in my opinion, to fall off in batting average to really have a chance at beating him in the MVP race.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I think you see the 2018 players and you see the 2018 MVP race. And just there wasn't talent like Shohei Ohtani that year. Just on a generational player who is you're not going to see maybe ever again.
I don't think there's any talent to compare to this guy. I think hands down he's the greatest baseball player of all time.
I think it's really early to say that, but I think if he continues to play like he has, then I will completely agree with you.
There's nobody ever that can throw a 99-mile-an-hour fastball, steal 30 bases in a season, and hit 450-foot homers at the same time while he has stayed healthy his entire career.
Yeah,
he doesn't miss games.
Yeah, you see that, but what if he never pitches again? And that's honestly what you kind of have to look at. And he would be obviously a Hall of Fame player and still I think up there in the GOAT conversation. But it's these things where you have to see in the future, how would you look at him? And I had this conversation with a friend who's the greatest player of all time. And obviously people, I think especially casual baseball fans, would immediately go to Babe Ruth.
No.
But I don't think he could honestly hit the ball off of our Marquette High School baseball team.
If we're talking about most influential baseball players of all time, yes, he's up there. He's incredibly influential. Nobody's going to argue that. He revolutionized the game. But could he survive in today's MLB like Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays? Absolutely not. There's no chance. And this is actually a pretty good conversation for a whole podcast of who's the greatest baseball player of all time. But point being, Shohei Ohtani is very much up there with what he's doing this season.
Well, 100% agree.
And for the NL East, the Braves, not great. The Mets, you would not know that they pay more than 75-80% of teams. Marlins, they suck. And I just wrote, God dang, Philly is good. and they're real good.
No, for sure.
Oh my.
For sure. The Phillies have had a great season. Being up there with World Series level playing. And I think they for sure have a chance to do that this year.
And you look, they drop Rhys Hoskins in the offseason.
Exactly,
That's a guy that he really performs in the postseason. And you're still 62-34 in a good NL East.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wild. Like, this is a very, very, very good team that has a lot of mileage to go forward.
Yeah, for sure. And you see those records, and records in baseball, I think, it can be deceiving, like records in college basketball, because, the Brewers have had an awesome record this year, but the NL Central is just horrible. And honestly, like, the Brewers are the only average team.
I wouldn't say horrible, but I wouldn't. Because you look at the records, every team is middle of the pack. My notes for this is that the Brewers are smashing it. They are 55-42. That's awesome. That's above my expectations. And the Cubs and Reds are faltering. Both had hot starts to the season, and they both kind of fallen off. I wouldn't say it's a bad division, because if you're putting, you have the bottom two teams being miles better than the bottom two teams in the NL East. I think if you're looking at the most solid division in baseball this year, shockingly, it's the AL East and the NL Central. All-around teams, it doesn't get much better than that. In terms of top-heavy, we're looking at the NL East and the AL West.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
So, in terms of players, Bobby Witt is hanging around. He's not having the year I expected him to have, but he's still doing a very good job nonetheless. Tariq Skubal is awesome. This guy from day one has been real good. I think he's got Rookie of the Year, Cy Young potential written all over him. And Chris Sale revitalizing his career with 15 wins in the first half, stepping into the Spencer Strider role in the Braves rotation.
Yeah, for sure. And you think Cy Young, and what about this Paul Skeens kid who has come up, honestly, out of nowhere and dominated the league? He hasn't lost a game in over a year.
For my money, he's the best pitcher in the world right now. And we're not looking at, like, overall resumes, but if you would put him against anyone in the world, he would strike them out.
No, for sure.
It's going to be very indicative in this All-Star game start tonight. We're recording this on Tuesday of the All-Star game, where he's really going to be going forward. Can he hang with some of the big AL hitters? I think he can. He's mad good.
No, he's actually crazy. And, he came middle of the season, so winning things like Cy Young and coming into the All-Star game when he hasn't pitched an entire season, in normal circumstances, I would consider that controversial. But just how amazing he has pitched this season in general, and just how much he's dominated. He no-hit the Brewers just a few days ago. And it's just been absolute talent that you love to see, especially out of a young guy.
According to him, Baby Gronk couldn't do that. That was a great quote by this man, Paul Skeens. But yeah, overall, good MLB first half, about what I expected. There's no oh my goodness, this team is crazy, apart from the Phillies. But it's a very solid season, and I'm looking forward to the trade deadline because it could be very interesting this year with the Dodgers underperforming. Could they look to buy even more at the deadline? The Yankees, could they be looking to make another push? And, of course, the Orioles, I'm looking for them to make a big splurge this season.
Yeah, for sure. All those teams need to do what's necessary at the trade deadline, and I think the last thing that you want to do is underperform at the trade deadline this season for those teams like the Dodgers and like the Orioles, because that would ruin the rest of your season and possibly ruin the next 5 years of your franchise.
Yep, motto being, along with a lot of other things in baseball, don't be like the Cubs.
Yeah.
So that'll wrap it up for this podcast. Once again, Sunday we're doing a YouTube collab with JLG Pastel, one of many more to come, getting our WWE year in review so far. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming on, Tom. It's been nice having you. Section101.org. That's his little project. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and see you next time.